You know the moment, it's 10:47 p.m., you're at your desk, you just got a text from an employee, something about overtime or sick leave or a complaint, and suddenly you're deep in a spiral of tabs. Is it federal versus state labor law? Can I terminate for this? What counts as harassment? Is this lawsuit worthy? You're not running your business anymore, you're panic Googling your way through it. Welcome to It's Personnel, a podcast proudly sponsored by Helpside. For over 35 years, Helpside has served as a strategic partner for small and mid-sized businesses, providing solutions for payroll, Fortune 500 benefits, and expert HR guidance. Today, we're talking about the gap between doing it yourself and doing it right. Because Google doesn't know your state, your industry, your employee history, or the nuance of your culture. And one wrong interpretation can cost you far more than a late night of lost sleep. Small business owners wear every hat: CEO, marketer, accountant, operations manager. But HR isn't a hat you want to improvise on. In this episode, we're diving into why having real HR expertise at your fingertips isn't a luxury, it's a growth strategy. It protects your people, it protects your company, and it gives you back your time and your confidence. So close the extra browser tabs, take a breath, and let's talk about moving from reactive panic to proactive support.
Thanks for that intro, Brandon. I love this topic. I'm really excited to talk about it with you today. Let's introduce ourselves really quick. My name is Rochelle Beers. I am an HR manager with Helpside. And then we have Brandon. He is our vice president of HR. And let's talk a little bit about why having HR or pro HR support as part of your strategy is not only important, but imperative. I think preparation and planning goes a long way, and even if that's just making sure that you are prepared for when these kinds of questions come, it's better than being caught in surprise and scrambling. You don't have to be an expert at HR, but just having that support at the ready, I think, is really critical. So Brandon, tell me, why do you think it's important for companies, even small ones, to build HR support into their growth strategy?
Yeah, the neat thing about a small business is that they want to do what they're best at, right? They want to be able to sell items. They want to be able to manufacture their product in a way that they know how to do. So as they start out a small business, they're few employees. They're not thinking about what happens as they grow. They're just looking to get product out the door, sell their product. So when they partner with a PEO like us at Helpside, what's fantastic is we give them, we take that worry off their plate by helping them understand, hey, there are some big thresholds that you need to be aware of. For example, as you cross the line of 14 to 15 employees, so once you get to 15 employees, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act kicks in. There's a lot more protections that are available to your employees because of that act. Also, the Americans with Disabilities Act kicks in, and the nuances that come with having to follow the interactive process of the ADA. As that small business continues to grow, there's the 50 employee threshold. And so once they cross the 50 employee threshold, they're then subject to the Family and Medical Leave Act, the FMLA, and how do you navigate that as a small business owner? That's intimidating. Couple that with the fact that each year more and more states are putting in various thresholds: 5 employees, 3 employees, 2 employees. It just depends on the state, but they're putting in thresholds where random laws apply to these states. So it's absolutely confusing, and it's can be overwhelming for a small business owner if they're not paying attention.
And it changes too, from year to year. Things adjust and change. It's challenging even for an HR expert to stay on top of that. But of course, that's what we do day in and day out. And I liked how you talked about these thresholds, which I think are critical. But it's not just when you hit 15. Also, I think understanding the flexibility that you have when you are under 15 and making a conscious, intentional decision in your hiring and your growth to decide, when are you ready to take on that next level of responsibility as a business owner. One question that we get all the time, I'm sure you've had this too, Brandon, is, well, what if I'm at 14 today and then I'm at 15 tomorrow and then in a week I'm back at 14? How does that responsibility, does it just come and go immediately? Like, how do I know when I've actually hit that threshold?
If you had 15 employees for 20 or more in the previous year, the work weeks there, then at that point you would be eligible. So it's not just, hey, I hired somebody, boom, I'm automatically eligible, or I had them for one day, I was over that threshold. There's a look back period. And again, it would come from partnering with Helpside. We'd help you understand that there's more than just a shot in the dark answer to this. There's actual guidance where you could rely on whether or not you'd be whether or not you would be subject to the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And typically, like, that's the first thing we think of. My first question always when I'm working with a client is I'm looking up how many employees that they have and kind of what that history is and whether they've hit that 15 threshold. But it also applies to the 50 threshold where FMLA kicks in. It's got to be 20 or more work weeks in the current or previous year. So having somebody tracking that for you and paying attention, I think, can be really important. You kind of also touched on other states, which I think in today's world, it's pretty rare that we just stick local, right? There are so many jobs that can be done remotely, and it's so common that when companies are putting something out, like a job posting on Indeed, it's possible for that job to be done remotely or from another state. And that opens up a whole other world of things to consider and think about, such as, for example, pay transparency laws. That's something that I don't think anybody thinks about, but we have all of these states that are now requiring certain levels of pay transparency, even when you're just going to post the position. California is a good one. Like, even if a job could be done in California, there is a certain level of pay transparency required on that job posting. Maybe ban the box. That's another one that we are seeing a lot of states. There's just variances between the states and how these laws apply. So ban the box is essentially if you have an employee and then you're running background checks, it's basically when can you consider or ask about criminal history. A lot of states are saying, well, you can't even look at that or consider it until after you've made the offer. It's not something that you can be considering before. And so I think understanding those nuances, depending on the state that you're hiring in, is pretty critical.
Well, you bring up a good point, Rochelle. I mean, a small business owner will come to us, and maybe they're operating very local. They're familiar with the state laws, or at least they've been familiar enough with the state laws that they're operating in that they feel comfortable. But sometimes, and then this is the balance between do I want to hire local talent, or do I want to try to get even greater talent and look remote to get that talent? And so the nuance there is, okay, am I comfortable with the risk that some states bring? So, for example, if you look at a California or a New York, some states are just harder for a business to operate in. And usually on the flip side, what that means is that those laws are more in favor of protecting the employee, which is a great thing as well. So, but as a business owner, you may be ignorant to what these laws are, and you're unwillingly not providing something like, as you mentioned, maybe it's a paid sick leave provision, or maybe it's you didn't have the posting requirement for the position. So by understanding that each state operates differently and can be easier or less easy for a business to do that in, you can then make a strategic decision of how much risk you want to allow your business to have.
I love that. I've seen that before where, you find this great candidate, you hire them, and they're in one of those states that you mentioned, and now all of a sudden you're knee-deep rehashing your entire policy. You're putting together a paid sick leave plan, or trying to fit that within your PTO that you already have, and making adjustments that really disrupt everybody in the company. And that can be okay if you're ahead of it and thinking ahead, because I think we can always figure that out. But when surprised, it's never fun, for sure.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Rochelle, so one of the things, and I know you get this question every day, like, what do I do if an employee comes to me? Let's pretend that we're over the 15 threshold. An employee comes to me and says, hey, I think I'm being harassed at work. What steps do you take? What do you follow? How do you answer that if a business owner comes to you and asks that?
Yeah, I think the step one is gathering information. Typically, if I'm talking to the business owner, not the complainant themselves, my first question is, hey, like, to what level do we understand where this person is coming from? Do we have a written statement? Was it just a short verbal conversation? But I'm going to start asking a lot of questions, because we want to unturn every possible stone as a first step. I want to know absolutely everything that this complainant is saying and claiming, and then I want to get it in writing so that it's not just my interpretation of what was said. I want that, the who, what, when, where, and why on paper, and were there witnesses? Is there evidence? What is there? I really want to get the full understanding of what that is. And a lot of times, Brandon, when we get to the bottom of what the employee is saying, it's not actually like true harassment discrimination that crosses the legal line. In fact, that's so rare. I would say that in my career, the amount of times that I've seen something cross the legal line where, I think it does anyway, right? I'm not an attorney, I'm not a judge, I'm not a jury, but I look at that and I go, ooh, that could be, the definition is so rare. It's like 1%. But that doesn't mean that the complaint isn't important and that we shouldn't take it seriously. But I think also understand, like, step one is gather information. Step two is evaluate. What are we dealing with? Is this just a policy violation? Is this just culture violation? Is this something that could be more serious?
That's one of the things that I've loved that we're able to do for our clients is give that live version of a harassment and discrimination prevention training to, for me at least, I've loved when I've been able to go out, meet employees, help them understand that the whole reason we're here to give this training is because your employer cares about you. They want you to feel respected at work. And so whether, to your point, whether it crosses the legal line of harassment or not, employers want their employees to feel comfortable at work and safe, and they want them to be able to raise concerns if they have those. And so by allowing us at Helpside to come out, deliver a live or in person if they're close enough, but a live virtual harassment and discrimination prevention training, it really allows the employees to feel respected, one, but then understand what they really should be concerned of. And I've loved being able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great way to get to know the business better and the client. On that same note, so I think that doing harassment discrimination training for employees is critical because it helps them understand the complaint process, which the EEOC has said over and over again how important it is for clients to have a very well communicated complaint process, right? That's more than one level deep. We don't want to say, oh, just go talk to your supervisor. Like, what if the supervisor is actually the issue? What is the employee supposed to do then? A company needs to be able to show that they have given employees avenues to complain and to resolve situations without fear of retaliation. On the flip side, I think, and I dare say this is even more important, managers who make employment decisions should also have training. I mean, a lot of times we promote within our own company people who are really, really good at their job and they deserve that promotion. We want to build leaders, but there's some training that needs to be had. I don't think every manager who starts out knows everything about employment law that they need to. So I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about our manager training?
Yeah, well, I love that. We've geared a whole list of trainings towards those frontline supervisors, like you said, Rochelle. Topics from hiring and firing, onboarding, navigating the medical leave process, really things that these frontline supervisors, these managers need to know, but to your point, maybe they just got promoted because they were excellent at what they were doing. I can think of experiences that we've had at Helpside where we've had a contact. So with our clients, there's usually one point of contact who's the main person that we work through for that group. And so where we've had a contact who hasn't been super familiar with HR law and or how to approach these things, and I love when we get the opportunity to work with this individual, that frontline manager, that contact, and help them develop and grow into where they feel comfortable with those questions. And that's really the key, I think, for any frontline supervisor. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable when they're getting asked a particular question or just go off of and say any random thing because they're nervous. They need to know how to respond appropriately or when to take a breath and pause. Call for some guidance, and obviously that's what we do. What other experiences have you seen, Rochelle, where maybe clients have had individuals who've partnered with us, and how has that helped them grow in their career?
Yeah, that's actually one of my personal favorite things is when I get to partner with somebody who has little to no HR experience, but maybe a little spark of interest because they feel motivated, they want to be able to do their job well, they want to grow as leaders. I love that. I've had many experiences working with somebody who's maybe an office manager or hired on, was a customer service rep, and then they find that, oh, this person's really good at administrative work. Maybe you could start, kind of running the front office. And then that job expands as the company grows into, now this person's handling all the HRs. They become the go-to person, right, for the people, the internal employees. And that person can easily become overwhelmed and need support. It is so much fun to be able to make that person look like a rock star. If they can, at least just figure out, okay, when do we need to call our HR support or Helpside? And then we can give them the answers, the scripts, this is how you do it. Let me be on that call with you. It's your first time doing X, Y, or Z. Maybe it's a coaching session or some type of verbal warning for an employee. Like, how do we do that in a really positive way that builds that employee up so they're not leaving with their head down, but feeling empowered, like, oh my gosh, I know how to do this now, or, whatever it is. But helping that individual who has not had those difficult conversations before and helping them knock it out of the park is so much fun. We love doing that. And it's great too for the company because they can hire somebody that has less experience and maybe isn't like $100,000 plus employee, give them that experience so it's really beneficial to that employee, but also really beneficial to the company.
While we're on that topic, Rochelle, what are some areas, and I'll share one that comes to mind for me, but what other areas can you think of that these frontline managers or supervisors will sometimes trip up in, or maybe they discipline when they shouldn't? So for example, just to get us thinking, oftentimes I'll get calls and they'll say, hey, I've got an employee that's talking about their pay with somebody else. Like, what do I do? And the nuance there, what we need to be aware of is that there's a protection for that for the employees. It's called concerted activity, and they have the ability to discuss working conditions, pay, other conditions of the workplace. And so again, you need to tread lightly as an employer by making sure that if there truly is something to discipline on, let's dig that out. Are they not meeting expectations? Are they not abiding by policy or procedures that have been outlined? But if it's just a matter of talking about pay with their coworker, or if they're talking about these work conditions, oh, it's so hot in here, when is the AC going to be fixed, and you're considering that as the sole motivation for corrective action, that could potentially be a hiccup. What other areas do you see these frontline supervisors stumble, or really where we wish they would just take a second longer to breathe, pause, and before responding? Yeah,
I love that. That first example you brought up is great. Talking about pay, right? And sometimes I've even seen that written in policies. Like a company will not realize that that's protected activity or potentially protected activity, and they'll put that in their policy that employees are not allowed to discuss their pay with each other. Whistleblowing, that's another one where somebody, like you mentioned, let's say it's too hot or too cold, or an employee even mistakenly feels like the company has made an error, a safety error, something like that, and then they call OSHA or they put it in some complaint with the DOL. They're allowed to do that. And so we can't let that be the sole motivation behind, really anything that could look like retaliation. Employees are allowed to make good faith complaints to the proper person within their organization or even outside the organization. Now, one thing, Brandon, that I think is so awesome about Helpside is clients can put an extra step in there. If an employee feels like my company's not listening to me, or even if they think they would never listen to me, or I'm afraid that the company's going to do this, that, and the other, have them call Helpside first. We're another layer. We'll listen, we'll take in all the information, and then we're going to circle back to leadership and help weigh the risk of next steps, like what should we do? How do we want to respond to that? But those are just probably some of the ways that I see that. The other one would probably be when you have an employee with attendance issues, and they're sick all the time, right? Like they just keep getting sick. They're calling in, calling off last minute. It is so tempting to just immediately go to corrective action or even termination. What are the dangers of doing that, Brandon?
We can approach that from a couple of ways, but without getting a full understanding of the situation. Maybe there's an undisclosed medical condition that they've just been super uncomfortable telling you about, and maybe you're over those limits, those thresholds where the ADA and or the FMLA will apply. In that case, there's an obligation on the employer to explore that. However, let's take that out of the case. I think what's sometimes misunderstood from an employee standpoint with corrective action, your employer wants you to be successful. Like when I hire a new employee, I'm not counting down the days until I can give corrective action or fire them. Nobody wants that. No small business wants to even have to deal with that. And so I think if from an employee standpoint, if they can understand, hey, my employer wants me to be successful. So to your point about corrective action, the whole point of corrective action is to help an employee understand that here's where I need you to perform and here's where you're performing. And so as clearly and as confidently as a manager or a frontline supervisor can deliver that message, the better it is for the employee, the better it is for the company. And those are things that I think sometimes without a full understanding, you brought up an attendance issue, for example, without, it's like, be here on time, just, get here on time, but without a full understanding of what might be contributing to that happening and this tardiness occurring, we can jump into a corrective action where maybe we needed to just have a coaching conversation, and maybe we just needed to have a better understanding of what's prohibiting that individual from being successful. So what I love, though, in the corrective action process, it really outlines and you're trying to be as clear as possible with these employees that, hey, I want you to be successful. In fact, I need you to be successful. I hired you so that you can help us do this, or that. And in order for us to be successful, here's what I need you to start doing more of, or start doing less of, or change this behavior. And oftentimes that's formalized in the form of corrective action, whether that's a verbal warning or a written warning or a final warning. So as a whole, I think if we can view corrective action as an opportunity to really get on the same page, that'll help employers down the line when it comes to unemployment claims, when it comes to claims of wrongful termination. What are some of the pitfalls you see, Rochelle, if, for example, the question I get a lot, should I include a termination reason when firing somebody? I know how I've answered that in the past, but what are your thoughts on whether or not you should include a termination reason?
Yeah, I love that question. I think, moving all the way down to termination, that's a tough conversation to have with somebody when we get to that place. And we always hope that we've done a good job, that it doesn't come as a surprise, and that employee feels like we have done everything that we can to help them be successful. Just to piggyback all the things that you're talking about, there really is a way to make these tough conversations positive and really about that employee, and to show that we want them to be successful. And I love that. That's one of the many things, I think, Brandon, that you and I completely agree on in terms of our approach to HR. But when it comes to the termination, I, as much as possible, think it's important to provide a reason. I think understanding can help an employee sort of put that guard down. Especially if the reason why, and it should always be this way, the reason why we terminate somebody should always be business justifiable. There's got to be a good reason that a reasonable person can understand. And so I think talking through that with the employee is important. Otherwise, what can happen is we get emotional as humans and we make up stuff that likely isn't true, but can open the company up for risk. If an employee doesn't understand why they're being let go, sometimes they'll attribute it to something that they can't control, like maybe even a protected class. And that's where I think we get into some danger.
I completely agree. I think, again, put yourself, if you're the business owner watching this and you're looking at your frontline employees, these are questions that they're getting hit with every day that are probably trickling themselves up to you. Whether you want to or not, somebody at every business has to deal with HR issues. So these are the things that those individuals are getting asked, and you got to have an answer for. You got to know how to approach that situation.
Yeah, I agree. And the good news, Brandon, is like when you get caught off guard as a manager or a leader in the organization, it has to be 100% okay to say, you know what, that's a great question, or you've brought up such a great point. Let me think about that for a minute and get back to you. Sometimes I think that is the most intelligent and safest thing you can do, rather than try to always feel like you have to have the answer, and then you muddle through some things and you say something that really shouldn't have been said, and now you've lost the respect of your employee. I think it has to be okay to just pause.
I completely agree. And then that's where I'll put the plug in for Helpside. That's where we want that leader or that business owner to call us up and say, hey, this is the situation. What do I do? And rely on our team of experts. Between Rochelle and I and our team of business partners and HR representatives, we've had thousands upon thousands of these type of conversations where we can absolutely step in and give you good guidance on how you can proceed. Now, no matter what you decide to do, there's always risk. There's risk if you decide to keep an employee around and they're decreasing morale. There's risk if you decide to terminate that employee. There's always risk, but we can help you understand what those risks are so that you can feel comfortable as a business owner moving forward in a way that, okay, I've done everything that I can to mitigate the risk in this situation. I've tried to help this employee be set up for success. And so at this point, I've decided to go go XYZ and proceed that way. So I love that you bring up that pause. That's that chance to get others involved and then come back with a good, appropriate strategy to the employee. And the employee's going to feel that too. You know, if I get an off-the-cuff answer from my supervisor and it hasn't been well thought out, or maybe not even be true, I'll start to question those answers as an employee. And so I think that's a great strategy.
So kind of circling back, Brandon, I think as a business owner, you're looking at all of these things that need to be done. One thing that I always try to stay away from as an HR professional is fear mongering, right? Maybe just think about this for a second. Maybe some of you listening have had this experience before where HR becomes like the Toby Flenderson, the person who's just the big downer, the person who's always like, be careful, you can't do this, like don't do that, don't do this, the big naysayer. And I think that HR needs to not be that way. I think that our role needs to be to help save time, save money, help our business owners really build their culture and a foundation that is going to lend itself to longevity for the company. I think listening to all of the details and all of the things that involve HR can be very overwhelming to a business owner who's like literally trying to get stuff done and be profitable so that there are jobs for these employees, right? One thing that you can maybe see in your mind is this natural progression that can happen as you hire managers and start to allow leadership to grow within your company. Having support like Helpside really helps decentralize a lot of this stuff. And so when employee issues come up, things that could potentially be landmines, having somebody for your manager to call one-on-one so that we can talk through it, get through most of the time-consuming pieces, and then only bring to leadership, hey, here are the two options, here's how we've weighed the risk, what direction would you like us to go, and then boom, we can execute. But that's one of the coolest things, I think, as we've talked about before, leveling up managers and points of contact to the point where they become HR experts too. So.
Well, and that's such a burden off the shoulders of a business owner, right? Not having to, I think about even a seasoned HR professional navigating the medical leave process, for example. That's a cumbersome process, and it requires you sending out the right forms. It's time intensive to determine if they're even eligible, and running reports on hours that they've worked, and waiting and marking your calendar for their forms to come back. I mean, it's a burden. So to your point of what you just said, if you can have somebody that you've hired come to you with, I've got two options, here's how we can approach this situation, and they've already done the legwork for you for that administrative burden of determining if that individual is even eligible for leave, or if we need to even be considering that. Like, to me, that's a huge weight off a business owner's shoulders, and we want to help with that. We want to support them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Brandon, did you know that every year at the EEOC, they rank the charges that come against companies? And aside from retaliation, which we know is always paired with another, so it's always number one, what is the number one charge against companies every single year?
Tell us, Rochelle.
It's disability, always. The ADA happens all the time. It's just so easy to make employment decisions when it appears that somebody is not performing without going through that interactive process, which is required by law, and making sure that we've covered all of our bases and complied. So I'm glad you brought that up. Definitely something that having HR expertise help with can save companies down the road. Number one charge.
Absolutely. Well, and as a business owner, you know how hard it is to hire the good people to help get your company where it needs to be. And so I think one of the things that's often overlooked as HR, like you mentioned, Rochelle, we don't want to be the scare police or the compliance police. We want to help the employees that truly want to be successful. We want to help them be successful, and you do that through culture activities. You do that through total compensation and rewards. You do that through one-on-ones and positive conversations with the employees and helping them understand what it takes to be successful and progress to the next level. And then also just giving them the experience they need to build a resume or move into a career path. I'll speak to one thing that I like to do on my team, and this is unique. Not every manager does it, but I tell employees as they join the HR department, I want to see you successful. I want to see you be successful, whether that's here at Helpside or with another company. So let me be a champion for you and help you get the skills that you need to move into the industry that you want, or to progress and get this certification so that you can do this or that. And not all managers, I think, know how to approach that conversation or have time to go down that road. And so if we get a client that's wanting to really reward and empower and engage their employees, what are some things, Rochelle, that you think they can do to partner with us to help their employees feel appreciated?
Yeah, I love that. And I love that approach that you take, and I've adopted that as well. And the funny thing is I think sometimes we lead from fear, right? I don't want my employee to leave. I need to make sure that they stay here. And so we think of all of these ways to keep them. But honestly, building their resume, helping them feel championed is one of the ways that you're not going to be able to get rid of your employees. They're going to want to stay. They're going to want to continue working for you. It's a way that you build loyalty. And all the things that we've talked about, I think that engagement and retention and building culture, that's where we should be spending most of our time. It's yes, we don't want to be surprised when some issue comes up or an employee is complaining, but day to day, our time and attention should be spent on engaging our employees and helping them want to stay with this company. There are a few things that I could talk about with that. I think having culture events and showing appreciation to employees is so much fun and can be done in so many creative ways. And you and I have teamed up on that for years and really enjoy that part of our personal jobs, but also sharing that with clients. But also another thing that I think gets overlooked all the time is onboarding. That you get one chance to make a first impression with your employees, and having a strong onboarding program has been proven statistically over and over again to increase retention by leaps and bounds. So developing that, it might take some time on the front end, but boy, does it save time and money on the back end when your turnover, has decreased, and it's incredibly low because you've got employees that basically come in, get a great understanding of your culture, and then really hit the ground running.
Well, and we've got the resources in place at Helpside to really put a solid plan together to where the business owner's employees are going to feel appreciated on day one. Because everyone knows how hard starting a new job is. And even when you get onboarding right, it can be a challenging thing to start a new job and learn new things. So the fact that, like you said, you need to get it right because it's hard enough starting a new job as is. And so businesses are able to partner with us. We can talk about best practices. We can sculpt and create a plan that really is going to be relevant to their industry, their office situation, their culture that they're looking to build. And I think we can truly help those employees feel appreciated so that they remain with the company as long as long as they can be successful. And obviously as that's a good thing for both them and the business.
Right. And it's funny because I think we think about onboarding as maybe like a day or a week. True onboarding can last as long as a year, and it should be a very thoughtful process in terms of training and really enveloping somebody in the culture. One thing that I think happens quite a bit is employees will, maybe you'll start to sense some unrest in your company, and maybe you've got some employees complaining about this, that, or the other. Doing engagement surveys can be very helpful in understanding what is actually important to your employees, and then building a total rewards I guess it's not a program, but strategy to make sure that you're hitting the nail on the head on the things that are most important and not wasting money and energy on things that your employees really don't care about. So I think that's one key thing as well.
I completely agree. And another thing on top of that, I mean, you can literally ask your employees to be a one-on-one. If you don't have the system, we could help you with an engagement survey. Yes. But if you don't have the system in place to do a formalized thing, start small, meet with them regularly, have a one-on-one once a month where you can give them an opportunity to share what's going well, what's not going well. And really the key there is to help them feel appreciated, help them have a good understanding of what's required them in their current role. And when that's all happening on a regular basis and they know that they've got a safe place that they can come to you as their manager or as the business owner to share, here's where I'm at on this project, or here's where I'd like to go. I love this or that about the company. Starting small with a simple one-on-one program doesn't need to be cumbersome. I think where business owners get overwhelmed is like, oh man, it's review season. What do I do? How do I put together a total, a performance review that gets input from peers and it's a 360 and they go down that road and all of a sudden they're swamped because it's overwhelming. It doesn't have to be. Start simple, start small, start with one-on-ones on a regular basis, and that's going to give you the information that you need on how to have those conversations with the employees.
I love that. That's such a great place to build from. This has been fun. I'm glad that we've been able to talk about all of these things. And so as we kind of wrap this up, I think here's the truth. Panic Googling HR questions at midnight. First of all, it's not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you care. You want to do right by your people. You want to protect what you've built. You want to make the smart call. I completely get that. I think we get that. But caring in and of itself isn't a compliance strategy. Small businesses don't struggle because they lack heart. They struggle because they lack backup. And HR isn't just paperwork and policies. It is so much more than that. It's risk management, culture shaping, leadership support, and smart growth planning. And when you move from being reactive to proactive, everything shifts. You make decisions faster, you sleep better, you lead with confidence instead of fear and caution. And your business stops operating out of survival mode and starts operating strategically. And so if you've ever found yourself staring at that glowing screen thinking, I hope this answer is right, kind of crossing your fingers, consider this your sign. You don't have to figure that out alone, because the strongest small businesses aren't the ones that know everything. They're the ones that know when to call the pros, okay? Curious about working with Helpside? If you are, give us a call. We'll give you a free 15-minute benefits audit. We'll look through all of we'll answer your questions. We would love to talk to you. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us on It's Personal, sponsored by Helpside. See you next time. And remember, build boldly, lead wisely, and maybe close a few of those browser tabs.